When an avoidant person finds themselves deeply drawn to someone, their heart begins to wage an internal war between desire and defense. They crave connection, the warmth of being understood, the intimacy of being seen. Yet at the very same time, they fear it. This is the paradox of pursuit and distance. They lean in because they want you, and then, almost instantly, they pull away because they fear losing control. To the one who cares about them, this rhythm can feel confusing, even cruel. But to the avoidant, it's survival. Their need for closeness collides with an even greater need to protect themselves from the vulnerability that love demands. When an avoidant feels the spark of emotional intimacy, their instincts whisper warnings from their past. It's as if an inner voice says, "Be careful. Don't go too far. Don't get trapped." So they pursue connection cautiously, like someone walking a tightrope, balancing between desire and self-preservation. When they start to care, they might flirt, engage deeply, and make you feel special. But the moment they sense the possibility of dependency, they retreat. This isn't a rejection of you. It's a retreat into safety, a subconscious reflex born from past experiences where closeness felt suffocating or unsafe. Their behavior creates a dance, one that feels magnetic and maddening all at once. They move forward just enough to keep you engaged, then pull back to protect themselves. This dance isn't manipulation, it's fear disguised as control. The avoidant believes that if they can regulate the rhythm of closeness, they can prevent pain. So they measure affection, ration emotion, and test the waters of your patience. Every step forward is a risk, every step back a relief. They want love, but on terms that won't threaten their autonomy. Deep down, avoidants long for connection, just like anyone else. But where others see intimacy as comfort, they see it as exposure. They fear that if they let someone too close, they'll lose their sense of self. That love will consume their independence. So they hide behind logic, independence, or business, convincing themselves that distance equals safety. Yet, even while they create space, they think of the person they care about. They miss them in silence, replay conversations in their mind, and wonder if they've gone too far in their retreat. This paradox often leads to confusion for both sides. The one who loves an avoidant feels pushed away right when things seem most real. They start to question what they did wrong, unaware that the avoidant's withdrawal has nothing to do with their worth. It's the avoidant's inner tug of war between their yearning for closeness and their terror of emotional exposure. The closer they feel, the stronger the instinct to run. The further they run, the deeper their hidden desire becomes. Avoidants don't just withdraw physically, they retreat emotionally too. They'll appear calm on the surface while wrestling with waves of emotion inside. They might suppress their longing, downplay their interest, or even convince themselves they're better off alone. But beneath that cool distance lies intensity, an intensity they can't easily express. Their silence, their space, their detachment are not the absence of feeling, but the overflow of it. The more they feel, the more they fear. The more they want, the more they hide. It's a paradox that keeps them trapped between the desire to be known and the instinct to stay safe, a dance of closeness and distance that reveals just how much they care and just how deeply they fear being hurt again. When an avoidant person starts falling for someone, one of the first things they do is reach for control. Not control over the other person, but over their own emotions. They are terrified of being swept away, of losing the sense of stability they've built by keeping their heart guarded. So, instead of surrendering to emotion, they analyze it. They suppress their impulses, restrain their expressions, and study their own reactions as if love were a dangerous experiment. This control becomes their shield. It gives them a sense of safety in a situation that feels unpredictable, because nothing feels more unpredictable to an avoidant than their own vulnerability. When they start to care deeply, it stirs up a storm inside them, and the only way they know how to manage it is to tighten their grip on themselves. They might begin to appear composed, rational, almost indifferent. But this detachment is not absence of feeling. It's containment. They are managing intensity by masking it. Every smile they suppress, every urge to text, every moment they delay responding is part of an internal strategy to maintain equilibrium. Their logic whispers, if I can control my emotions, I can control the outcome. The irony, of course, is that love cannot be controlled. But to the avoidant, control is not about power, it's about safety. Their emotional regulation is a form of armor that protects them from the chaos they associate with closeness. Often, this control shows up in subtle ways. They'll keep conversations light, deflect deeper topics, or joke when moments get too emotional. They'll plan their responses carefully, making sure they don't reveal much too soon. If they sense that their feelings are becoming too visible, they'll retreat, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally. They'll say they're busy, or they'll focus on work, hobbies, or responsibilities, not to avoid you, but to avoid themselves. They are trying to prove to themselves that they can care without losing control, love without surrendering. It's their private way of testing how much emotion they can handle before it feels dangerous. The avoidant's need for control can even extend to timing. They prefer to initiate when they're ready and withdraw when they're not. If they feel too dependent on your presence, they'll intentionally create distance just to feel their independence again. To them, this is balance. To you, it may look like hot and cold behavior, but in their mind, it's emotional survival. Their past experiences, often rooted in environments where love felt conditional, overwhelming, or unreliable, have taught them that staying in control equals staying safe. Vulnerability to them once meant disappointment or abandonment, so they now guard it fiercely. What's fascinating is that the more they like someone, the more controlled they become. With people they don't care about, they can be open, expressive, even charming. But when their feelings run deep, they grow careful, cautious, restrained. It's as if they're trying to protect the part of themselves that finally feels alive, yet too fragile to be exposed. Inside, they might be thinking about you constantly, but outwardly, they appear calm, even distant. Their silence, their composure, their pause before speaking, all of it is part of the game their mind plays to keep their heart from showing too much. This control gives them the illusion of safety, but it also keeps them trapped. They live in a constant negotiation between emotion and logic, between wanting to reach out and needing to pull back. When they fall for you, their inner dialogue becomes a battle. Don't show too much. Don't get too close. Don't lose yourself. They believe that love can only exist if they remain in charge of their feelings. So they measure affection carefully, ration attention deliberately, and practice restraint as if their heart depends on it. But beneath all that composure lies the truth they rarely admit. They are not indifferent, they are overwhelmed. Their calm exterior is not proof of disinterest, but evidence of how hard they're trying to stay in control of something that already has their entire heart. When an avoidant person starts to care too deeply, something inside them begins to panic. The closeness they've allowed themselves to feel suddenly feels like a threat. Their emotions grow too large, too intense, and their instinctive response is to retreat. That's when the disappearing act begins. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, like messages that take longer to reply, plans that are postponed, or an emotional quietness that creeps into conversations. To the person on the other side, it feels confusing and hurtful. One moment there was warmth, connection, laughter, and then suddenly distance. But for the avoidant, this withdrawal is not a rejection. It's a form of emotional regulation. When they vanish, it's not because they've stopped feeling. It's because they're feeling too much. The disappearing act is their coping mechanism, their way of regaining emotional balance. When love starts to awaken old fears, the fear of losing themselves, the fear of being trapped, the fear of relying on someone, they instinctively retreat to solitude. They need distance like oxygen, not because they don't value the relationship, but because they don't know how to stay connected without feeling consumed. Their nervous system is wired to equate intimacy with danger, so disappearing becomes their reset button. It's the only way they know to restore the sense of control they lose when emotions start to take over. When they go silent, they enter a kind of emotional detox. They analyze everything, what they felt, what they said, what you said, what it all might mean. They replay moments in their mind, searching for proof that they are safe or unsafe. Their disappearance is filled not with peace, but with overthinking. They convince themselves that they need space to think, but what they are really doing is trying to calm the inner storm that closeness stirred. This withdrawal often feels like relief to them, but that relief is temporary, because even as they distance themselves, their thoughts circle back to you. They'll wonder if you're upset, if you've moved on, if you notice their silence. They might stalk your social media, reread old messages, or daydream about reaching out, yet resist the urge because returning too soon feels like surrendering to the same vulnerability they ran from. Their disappearing act isn't random, it's patterned. The closer they feel, the stronger the impulse to vanish. It's a cycle of emotional expansion and contraction. They open up, feel exposed, and then retreat to recover. This push and pull is exhausting for both sides, but to the avoidant, it feels necessary. When they disappear, they convince themselves that they're simply protecting their peace. But deep down, there's guilt for pulling away from someone who didn't deserve it, guilt for needing space that they can't explain, guilt for feeling love as fear. They may even rationalize it by telling themselves that you're better off without them, that they're too complicated, too detached, too independent. But underneath those justifications is the truth they rarely admit. They care more than they can handle. To the person who loves them, the silence feels unbearable. It feels like rejection, abandonment, or punishment. But in the avoidant's inner world, it's self-preservation. Their withdrawal isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting themselves from the vulnerability of depending on you. They disappear because they don't yet know how to stay when emotions feel overwhelming. They believe that absence will make them feel stronger, that solitude will quiet their fears. But in reality, their retreat only deepens their attachment in secret. The more distance they create, the more they realize how deeply you've gotten under their skin. Their thoughts betray their silence. They miss you in ways they'll never admit, because admitting it means losing the very control they vanished to preserve. So they stay away until the fear softens, until they can convince themselves that they're ready to face connection again. But even then, a part of them still trembles, afraid that the next wave of closeness will trigger the same instinct to disappear once more. Avoidants have a unique way of testing emotional safety, often without even realizing they're doing it. When they start to care about someone, they don't rush in with full vulnerability. They move with caution, with small and deliberate steps. They'll drop hints, subtle remarks, or light confessions, not to manipulate, but to measure. Each small revelation is like dipping a toe into water, testing if it's safe to swim. They watch how you respond to their pauses, their silences, their hesitations. If you pressure them, they retreat. If you respond with calm assurance, they take one cautious step closer. These micro tests aren't about games. They're their way of protecting a fragile emotional system that doesn't trust easily. They've learned from experience that love can turn into exposure, that openness can lead to pain, so now they test before they trust. They observe everything, your tone, your reactions, how you handle their distance. When they reveal something slightly personal and you respond with empathy instead of intensity, they store that moment in their memory as evidence of safety. But if they sense judgment, impatience, or neediness, their defenses rise like walls. Their mind starts whispering warnings. See, it's not safe. You'll lose yourself again. What most people don't realize is that avoidants are deeply sensitive to emotional energy. They might appear calm or aloof, but internally they are scanning constantly for signs that they might get hurt. Their tests aren't designed to confuse you, they are designed to protect the part of them that once felt unseen, misunderstood, or controlled. Sometimes these tests are subtle acts of withdrawal, taking longer to reply, creating space, or sharing something vulnerable and then pulling back to observe what you do next. If you chase, they confirm their fear that love equals pressure. If you stay steady and grounded, they begin to relax. They are not looking for perfection, they are looking for safety. They need to know that their independence will be respected, that their boundaries will not be invaded, that you can handle their silence without trying to fix it. For them, emotional safety doesn't come from words, it comes from energy. The more consistently calm and grounded you are, the more their walls begin to soften. When avoidants care about you, their testing becomes almost instinctual. They may tease you lightly to see how you respond to vulnerability cloaked in humor. They might express skepticism about relationships, waiting to see if you'll argue or understand. They'll share a small truth about themselves and then observe whether you use it to connect or to control. Each of these small tests helps them gather data, emotional data, to decide if you are a safe space or another risk. They want to trust, but trust is something they build slowly, brick by brick. And every small moment of emotional safety you offer helps rebuild their faith. That connection doesn't have to mean losing themselves. Sometimes, when they sense that you genuinely care without suffocating, their tests become more tender. They may share something from their past, something that carries shame or pain, and watch how you hold it. They want to see if you listen, if you stay, if you keep their story sacred. They don't expect you to heal them. They just want to know that you won't use their vulnerability against them. And when they see that you don't, something changes inside them. The fear that once ruled their emotions begins to ease. They start to realize that love can exist without control. That closeness doesn't have to mean loss. But even then, the process is slow. They test, they observe, they retreat, they return. Each cycle is a lesson, each small act of trust a quiet milestone. Their testing is not about playing games. It's about reprogramming years of self-protection, about slowly teaching themselves that this time, maybe, love doesn't have to hurt. Avoidants often play what can only be described as the mirror game of independence. When they fall for someone, they rarely express it through direct pursuit. Instead, they mirror the energy they receive, reflecting it back in subtle, calculated ways. This is not a conscious manipulation, it's their emotional equilibrium at work. If you lean in too much, they pull back. If you pull away, they step forward, drawn in by the space you've created. It's a dance of distance and desire, and the rhythm is ruled by their need to feel both connected and free at the same time. They crave love, but they crave autonomy just as deeply. The mirror game becomes their way of maintaining balance in a dynamic that constantly threatens to make them feel exposed. When an avoidant senses that someone wants them too much, they start to feel the walls closing in. It's not that they don't want affection. It's that too much of it too soon feels suffocating. They begin to fear that they'll lose themselves in the relationship, that their individuality will dissolve into someone else's expectations. So they respond by withdrawing, not because they've lost interest, but because they're trying to reclaim the independence that keeps them feeling safe. In that withdrawal, they observe how you react. If you chase, they confirm their fear that love equals control. If you hold your ground, they begin to relax, sensing that perhaps connection and freedom can coexist. Their mirroring becomes a subconscious test of emotional boundaries, a way to measure whether the relationship allows them to be both together and separate. But when you step back, when you give them space, something inside them shifts. Suddenly, they begin to pursue again, not out of strategy, but out of instinct. The distance reignites their curiosity, their longing, their need to re-establish closeness on their own terms. The avoidance attraction often intensifies in absence because distance makes them feel safe enough to feel again. They can love from afar without the fear of being consumed. So they come closer, drawn by the same connection they once fled. It's a paradox that defines much of their emotional world. They want what they run from and run from what they want. This mirror dynamic can be confusing for their partner, who may feel like they're constantly being pulled in and pushed out. One day the avoidant is fully present, engaged, and affectionate. The next, they seem detached, unreachable, almost cold. But what's happening underneath is not indecision, it's balance seeking. The avoidant is mirroring your movements because they're trying to manage their own anxiety. When they feel you leaning too hard into them, they step back to catch their breath. When they sense you pulling away, their fear of abandonment awakens, and they move closer to restore connection. They aren't trying to play with your emotions, they're trying to find safety in a world that feels unpredictable. This pattern comes from a deep internal conflict, the desire to love without losing self. Many avoidants were conditioned early in life to equate closeness with danger or control. So when love starts to grow, their instinct tells them to protect their independence. The mirror game becomes a defense mechanism disguised as emotional strategy. It allows them to stay in the relationship without feeling engulfed by it. Yet beneath that careful balance lies a deep yearning to be understood. They want someone who doesn't chase but also doesn't give up, someone who can stand steady when they swing between distance and desire. When they find that steadiness, when they sense that you can handle their rhythm without demanding they change it, something begins to soften. Their mirror slowly fades, replaced by genuine vulnerability. They begin to realize that independence doesn't have to mean isolation, and that love doesn't have to cost them their freedom. It's a slow awakening, one that happens not through pressure or persuasion, but through the gentle realization that someone can love them without trying to own them. Avoidants have a way of expressing love that rarely fits the conventional mold. When they're crazy about someone, they don't always say it out loud. In fact, words often fail them. Instead, their feelings appear in subtle gestures, quiet consistency, and the spaces between their actions. This is what can be called the silent confession. It's the kind of love that hides in the details, in the way they remember something you said weeks ago, or how they fix a small problem for you without making it known. They show affection through protection, through quiet loyalty, through being there when you least expect it. They may not say, "I love you," but they'll notice when you're tired, bring you something that makes your day easier, or ensure that you're safe without you even asking. Their silence isn't emptiness. It's a language of its own, one they've learned because speaking their emotions feels too risky. Avoidants often fear that if they expose the full depth of what they feel, they'll lose control or be misunderstood. Vulnerability, to them, feels like standing unguarded in a storm. So they express love in ways that allow them to stay emotionally safe. Instead of grand declarations, they offer stability. Instead of public displays of affection, they give quiet devotion. You'll know an avoidant cares deeply not by how loudly they speak, but by how quietly they remain constant. They might not initiate every conversation, but they won't disappear when it truly matters. They might not flood you with compliments, but they'll defend you when someone else criticizes you. Their love is practical, grounded, and often invisible to anyone who doesn't know how to look beneath the surface. To the person on the receiving end, this can be confusing. You might question their feelings because they don't verbalize them or show them in the ways you expect. You might wonder why someone who seems distant also does small, intimate things that reveal care. But that's the paradox of the avoidant heart. They love through restraint. They protect the people they love the same way they protect themselves, by keeping everything under control. Their silence is not indifference, it's reverence. They're afraid that if they say too much, they'll reveal too much. And if they reveal too much, they'll be left exposed. So they communicate in gestures rather than words, in presence rather than promises. If you watch closely, you'll see how their silent confession unfolds in patterns. They'll remember your preferences without you reminding them. They'll show up when you need support, even if you never ask. They'll listen more than they speak, absorbing details that make you feel seen. When they care, they protect you emotionally, even from themselves. If they sense that their intensity might overwhelm you, they'll pull back, not because they don't want you, but because they're trying not to hurt you with their own fear. Their love is thoughtful, careful, and often invisible to anyone who mistakes words for depth. This silence is their love language, a quiet devotion built from years of learning that words can wound, that emotions can be weaponized. They'd rather act than speak because actions feel safer, more certain, less likely to be misinterpreted. The avoidant's silent confession can be seen in how they open up in small increments, sharing pieces of their inner world bit by bit, as if testing whether it's safe to be known. It's the way they linger longer than they need to, or how they keep returning even after they retreat. Their silence is not the absence of feeling, but the overflow of it, a love so strong it makes them tremble, a love they'd rather protect quietly than risk losing loudly. And if you're patient enough to see past their silence, you begin to understand that every unspoken word, every careful gesture, every steady presence is a declaration louder than any confession could ever be.